Oh man, things get a little bit spicy and exciting in California. Let me just tell you. It is Friday, and California still has not filed an appeal from a judge's ruling that found the California handgun roster unconstitutional. Now, there's a lot of talk and speculation that they may not appeal this one at all. Let's talk about it. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what's going on here. So earlier in the week, a judge in California found that parts of the California handgun roster were in fact unconstitutional. We've been saying that all along, right? Well, the parts that he pointed to specifically were the requirements that were necessary in order to get on the roster. That would be the loaded chamber indicator, the magazine disconnect, and micro stamping. Now, individually, you could find things that had one or maybe two of those features, but finding all three is impossible. There's nothing that has the loaded chamber indicator, the magazine disconnect, and the micro stamping all in one. So basically, it was a freeze on anything new being added to the roster, and that roster has been frozen for like a decade. So people in California could only get things that were a decade or more old in their models. So it was obviously a very big problem. The judge saw that nothing could be added to the list, making it a de facto ban, and so he said that these are unconstitutional just based on the plain text of the Second Amendment. Now, in my original video where I talked about it more in detail, I mentioned that California almost always typically has an appeal ready and waiting. That's California's MO. In the past, when there's ever been a major decision like this, they have an appeal ready to go. They file the appeal same day. In some cases, they even file an emergency appeal, and they get it heard really fast by a three-judge panel, the Ninth Circuit, or something like that. But they always do it very fast. In rare instances, they can take a little bit of time, but it's usually within the same week. So I said that I thought this week would be the week that we would see the appeal. I didn't think it was going to be the first day, but still I thought it would be this week. Well, here we are Friday, and no appeal. So what's going on? Now, remember that the judge in this case actually put a stay on his own order, finding that these elements of the handgun roster were unconstitutional, of 14 days. So if California does not file an appeal within that 14-day time period, then the injunction would be allowed to take place. The stay would be lifted after 14 days, and the elements of the roster would then be unnecessary, and things could be on the roster without having any of those features or items on them. And so this would be a very big deal. It's got a lot of people talking and a lot of people wondering what's going on here. There's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of talk around this, and there's also a lot of rumor. So let's go ahead and dive into exactly what I think is happening, just based off of my 40-something years of experience with California and California government and California gun control. So earlier this week, I said there was like a 50-50 chance that California was going to appeal. Now that we've gone through the remainder of the week and we still don't have an appeal, I'm going to say I'm more like 70% sure that California is not going to appeal. There's still a 30% chance, and this is obviously just based on my opinion, but I'm trying to think of exactly what's going on in California and why they didn't appeal immediately, or at least within the first week. Well, in my personal opinion, just based on what I know about California, California may not want to get themselves in too much trouble here. We have some pretty big cases that are, currently going through the court system. They're kind of in the final phases, like Duncan and Miller, which have to deal with California's so-called assault weapons ban and magazine bans. Now, if California appeals this, and the Ninth Circuit has to hear this appeal, the Ninth Circuit really hasn't had to do much post-Bruin. Basically, all they've done post-Bruin is send everything back down to Judge Benitez to be looked at further before it goes back up to them, which is kind of where we're at right now. Now, if this particular one goes up to the Ninth Circuit post-Bruin, there's a fairly good chance, especially because microstamping is really unavailable, that the Ninth Circuit could see that this is unconstitutional and it might not work in California's favor. As a matter of fact, that could end up hurting California's chances of winning in these other cases, which in my opinion are already slim, but I don't think California wants to add to that. So there's a fairly good chance that they're looking at the bigger picture here before coming up with, their final decision on whether or not they are or aren't going to appeal. I think it's all going to be based on how much they want to affect the what I would consider to be bigger cases that are currently there. Now, I'm not saying that, the roster is not a big case. Matter of fact, the roster is one of the worst pieces of gun control in the state of California. If you ask most Californians, if you had to pick one thing that you could overturn right now, that would probably be it, because there's workarounds for just about everything else. But the roster is pretty solid, and it's caused a lot of problems in that state. So I think a lot of people would probably say the roster. Now, again, I'm saying 70% chance here that the state is not going to appeal this. But we'll see, because again, at the end of that 14-day time period, that's it. The stay is over. The injunction is allowed to take place. And, companies and manufacturers are going to be able to apply to get on that roster. And without any, hurdles to jump through, being, all the different features that were previously necessary to do so, they would be able to get on the roster. Once they're on the roster, they're on the roster for a specific amount of time. That time, excuse me, could be extensive. So once they're on the roster, and let's say that California in the end, even, let's say California wins in the end, right? Let's play devil's advocate here. California ends up winning in the end. Well, these things that have already made it on the roster would stay on the roster, because it's basically like a contract. It allows those things to be sold. So I think this would have a major impact in the state of California. It would have a major impact for people's rights in that state and their ability to get what they want in the most modern thing. So again, it's pretty big news, I think, that California has not filed for that appeal yet, and it is Friday of that first week. Now, California isn't the only state with a roster either, so I can guarantee you there's a lot of people that are watching this very closely. I cannot stand the roster myself, so I'm going to be watching this one very closely as well. If anything changes, if the appeal is actually filed, and if the injunction is allowed to take place, I will let you guys know as soon as possible. So make sure you hit that little bell notification to let you know when new videos come out. Make sure you subscribe, because, again, this would be a major victory, and I'm very excited to see what happens here. So, again, here we are, end of week 1, and nothing yet. So we'll see what happens after this, and fingers crossed, right? I want to thank you all again very much for watching. Please like, subscribe. You guys have a great day.